Older Bookstore. This is Marina Lopes. I am the author of Please Yell at My Kids, a book about how we can build community and make parenting less lonely and more fun. Thank you so much for having me on. So I have been a foreign correspondent for 10 years, traveling around the world. And when I became a mom, I decided to collect some of the tips that I had learned from parents everywhere from Mozambique to Brazil to Singapore in a book. I also did more research and traveled to 10 countries, asking parents how they have hacked parenthood. What have they learned about everything from gender roles to sleep training to figuring out how to get postpartum support in a way that works for them. I've put all these lessons together in my book, Please Yell at My Kids, so you can find it in bookstores now. I was inspired to write this book during COVID. I had just left a stint as a Brazil correspondent for the Washington Post, and I had my both of my children in Brazil, surrounded by so much community and so much love. And then overnight, that community disappeared during the pandemic. And it got me thinking, how in the world do people do this without community? In the US, it's very normal to try to go it alone all the time. We are so overwhelmed as parents that there is a Surgeon General warning about parenting and how much anxiety it can cause. So I think we all know that something is wrong, something is not working, but we haven't quite found the answer to that. Parents all around the world are exhausted, right? Parenting is hard everywhere. But in the US, I found it uniquely lonely. Parents here were just constantly trying to juggle everything on their own without even admitting that it was hard. And so I wanted to know, how can I bring the community that I've seen abroad, the level of support and help that I've seen abroad to parenting here in America? For this book, like I mentioned, I traveled to 10 different countries and spent time with families. So that meant that in Sweden, I was looking at how dads share parental leave and what they learn during that time taking care of their kids. I went to Mozambique to watch how neighbors take care of each other and learn how I can make my neighborhood here in Maryland a Mozambican neighborhood where neighbors actually show up for each other. In China, I investigated how postpartum care works and interviewed postpartum nannies. I went to a postpartum nanny center to see how they support families in the postpartum period. So every country has figured out some hack that works for them. And I wanted to know, well, what can I bring back to the US to make parenting a little bit more fun here? Parenting is often seen as a solo sport here in America, whereas around the world, it's a team effort. You have aunties and neighbors constantly yelling at each other's kids, right? And helping to raise the next generation. I think in the US, we used to have a culture that was a little bit more like that. But the US prides itself on individualism. We want to go it alone and show everybody that we can do it. And I think that works really well when you are young, right? It's one of the few countries in the world where it doesn't really matter where you came from, what type of family you have. You can write your own story. You can move to a different city. You can take on a different career. You can make your life your own, right? And that's wonderful. And I love that about living here. But I think when you have kids is often the time when a lot of people suddenly look around them and they say, where is my village? And for a lot of us, that can start at home, right? We want a village, but we don't know how to be a villager. We don't know how to be a neighbor that takes care of other people. We don't know how to start that cycle of care. And so that's what I wanted to teach in my book. If you are looking for that village, if you are hungry for community, how can you build that here? It's wonderful that, Sweden has 480 days of parental leave. What can you learn from their example that you can bring to the US here where we don't have that, to change the gender dynamics in your home so that you actually feel like you have more support. It's wonderful that people in Mozambique know and love their neighbors. What can you learn from them to create a neighborhood of your own that looks like that? That was the idea behind the book. I wanted it to be a very practical guide for parents on how to learn from families around the world and bring those tips here to the US. So, one simple thing that I learned from my travels that I think all Americans should start doing right now is ask for help. We are so scared to ask for help because we think that, if you ask for help, it's going to look like you don't have it all together. But here's the secret. In communities around the world, it is very obvious that you can't do things alone, that you don't have it together. That is the starting point that everybody is at. And what I have found is that when I ask for help, what that actually is an invitation to intimacy. It's a shortcut. And so one of the first things I do is ask a neighbor for help. Of course, I'm not constantly asking for help. I'm also giving it, and that's very important. But I have found that by asking for help, I can start that cycle of care, right? I go and I ask a neighbor for help, and then they feel more comfortable asking me for help. I expose a vulnerability. I tell them what I'm struggling with, and they're more likely to do the same as well. So it's about starting that cycle. Don't be afraid to ask for help. It's not about trying to look like you have a perfect life and you have it all together. It's about laying things on the table and saying, listen, I can't do this on my own. I don't want to. I want a community. Are you interested in being a part of it? A couple of books that I've read recently that I really loved. One book is called The Original Daughter by Gemma Wei, and it is a fantastic book that takes place in Singapore and talks a lot about some of these themes that I love in my book: community, villages, expectations of perfection, and how we can break past that to really take care of one another. I have also really loved A Little Life. It's a book that has been recommended to me for a long time, and I have found it to be a very powerful work of literature that taps into human emotion in a way that I haven't seen done in quite a while. So those are two books that are on my nightstand that I have absolutely loved. The one thing that I want people to take from my book is that it does not have to be this way. Parenting does not have to be a solo project. You can bring other people into the fold, and you'll be better off for it, and so will your children. Around the world, I've seen that when families come together, when neighborhoods come together, when governments come together to support parents, everybody wins. And so if you are a parent who is struggling right now, who wants practical tips on how to make parenting more fun, how to make your kids more independent, how to lean on neighbors for support, check out Please Yell at My Kids. I wrote it for people exactly like you, and I'm so excited to share it with the world. And now I will read you a short passage from the book. This is from the introduction. My friend Melissa has the voice of a principal you don't want to cross. It's calm but firm, steady, and when the occasion calls for it, dripping with disapproval. When Melissa means business, she pairs the voice with her signature look. Lips pressed, eyes fixed. It's a face that welcomes any toddler's challenge. I've seen the combination make both children and adults stop dead in their tracks. And last Wednesday night, I watched as she aimed the combo at my 5-year-old son. Ollie, down. He was scaling her mid-century modern table, seconds away from toppling a plant onto a Persian rug. Ollie had crossed the line, and he knew it, but he did not move. Instead, he stared at Melissa, who met his gaze straight on. The two squared off in a silent duel, each waiting for the other to break. But I knew it was no match. Eventually, Ollie inched his body down, each limb accepting defeat individually. Head hung, he braced for his scolding. The table is not for climbing. If you do it again, I'll send you home. As mothers, Melissa and I are very different. Even if I wanted to, I'd never be able to pull off the look. The one time I tried, my 2-year-old giggled, assuming I was playing pretend. At Melissa's, there is no gentle parenting. Rules are set, expectations are high, and compliments are sparse. She is much more likely to say do better than great job. It's a parenting philosophy that might horrify some of my American friends, but still, several times a week I send my children over to eat, play, and occasionally earn the look. This was not a babysitting arrangement I settled for. In fact, my husband and I uprooted our family and moved across the world so that our best friends, Melissa and her husband Jeremy, could help us share the joys and burdens of parenthood, and in the process, yell at our children. We're not hippies, polyamorous, or cult followers, but having lived abroad for much of our adult lives, Both my husband and I were wary of raising our kids in a nuclear American family. Parenthood in America was isolating. We wanted to raise our children in a proverbial village with the strong community networks and multi-generational ties we had seen sustain families abroad. So we packed our lives and moved across the world to live next to our best friends, who happened to be in Singapore. We created an informal commune sharing childcare, playdates, and parenting each other's kids. I knew if my American friends had seen Melissa scolding Ollie, they would be uneasy. Discipline, they would assume, is a job best left to parents. To let someone else do it for you risks confusing or even damaging your child. But those friends, if they looked long enough, would also have seen my shy, introverted son giggling through the night at weekly sleepovers with his best friend, Melissa's son, Jay. Jeremy cooking dinner for us all at the end of a long week. All the kids squeezed into the back of my car, singing Frozen on the way to class. They would see homemade soup delivered to our door when we are sick, and bottles of champagne popped in our living room to celebrate promotions. When, after nearly 10 years of living abroad, we moved our family back to the States, I saw a very different dynamic play out. American parents draw boundaries, protect their personal space, and value their independence. But they are also harried, tired, and most of all, lonely. Many live across the country from both their families and their closest friends. Even if they know their neighbors, they can't count on them. American individualism, especially when it comes to parenthood, is failing them. Please Yell at My Kids is not a book about discipline or the merits of different parenting philosophies. It isn't about how to start a commune, but you'll see some ways to make it work. And it isn't about the myriad ways that American structures are failing families, especially mothers, because we know all that already. Somehow, despite the number of books written about the exhaustion of American parenting, we still don't have reliable childcare or meaningful paid family leave. And let's be real, it's going to take a while. Please Yell at My Kids is about taking apart the cultural rules and norms that we follow almost instinctively in order to examine whether they actually help us. Is it really wrong for another mother to discipline my kids? Or does it open them up to other parenting styles in important ways? Should childbirth be an intensely private experience or one where the mess and the bliss are laid bare for your family and friends to see? Should grandparents be left to enjoy their retirement or asked to stand in line at school pickup? These aren't just hypothetical questions. Each chapter includes practical steps for parents who want to adapt these traditions for themselves. The book calls on Americans to recognize what parents around the world already know, that raising children should not be a private project, but a shared one. Each chapter examines a parenting rule that bucks American traditions and offers an alternative version of what's possible when we bring others into the fold of parenting. These traditions challenge us to invite aging grandparents and meddling neighbors to our breakfast table, carpool lanes, and delivery rooms. Instead of defending what we stand for, they urge us to make room for who we stand with. The book follows the parenting journey chronologically, from pregnancy to childcare, tapping into wisdom from parents in 10 countries along the way. In addition to our own experience in Singapore and Brazil, I profile parents in China, Denmark, Sweden, Malaysia, France, Mozambique, the Netherlands, and Finland. These countries were not chosen at random, but rather because parents there have hacked an aspect of parenting that Americans struggle with. Much has been written about the benefits of raising children in Europe, but we can learn just as much from the Scandinavian welfare system as from Mozambique's sense of solidarity. Parenthood is hard everywhere, but in America, it is broken. Traditional ties that shore up families in countries like Brazil have fallen away, but unlike in Europe, government support has not stepped in to fill the gap. A historic reverence for individualism puts help, communal, family, or government sponsored, at arm's length. The thin webs of support that do exist, like community networks and religious ties, are quickly fraying. Of course, every country has its problems. In pointing out what each is doing right, especially in supporting parents, I'm not issuing a blanket endorsement of any culture or absolving it of its faults. Yet the conversations I've had with American parents from Oakland to North Carolina are infused with a hopelessness that I have not encountered elsewhere. It does not have to be this way. Parenting in America is hard, but our cultural assumptions about childbirth, family, and community only make it that much harder. Join me as we rethink the practices handed down to us as parents. Let's trade the overwhelm, relentlessness, and stress that has become synonymous with American parenting and replace it with community, balance, and most of all, fun. Thank you so much, Boulder Bookstore, for this opportunity, and I look forward to connecting with readers online.